What is up, guys? What is up? Welcome back to Silver Surfer's channel. Got a new fun one for you guys today. Something a little different you don't see all that often. And yeah, well, let's just kick this right off into it. So these, what you see in front of you, are national currency. And scroll in for that. You can see it written on the top there, national currency. What does it say? Secured by the United States bonds deposited with the Treasury of the United States of America. On the left there, you see it, the First National Bank of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Pay to the bearer on demand, $20. And so basically what these things are is, in a nutshell, from the period of the Continental Currency, American Revolution, all the way up until the Civil War, before we had a centralized banking theme, there was a number of different banks that would essentially issue out money. And this caused some issues because of the fact that you would, say for instance, if you live in New York City, you would get money out of a bank there, you'd take it to Boston, and you wouldn't be able to use it. It wasn't accepted for goods and services there. You couldn't exchange it to get any other type of cash or anything like that. And so you're essentially stuck with it for some time. So once we finally started printing our own money as a federal type of system, which is in the Civil War back in 1861, and that went on for a number of years until after the Civil War, we still had a number of different private banks that were essentially doing the same thing with this type of situation and printing money that was not being accepted elsewhere, so on and so forth. And so the federal government said, you know what, we got to put a kibosh on this and fix this. And so their idea was to create basically national currency in which banks, if they fit the description and regulations of the federal government's standards to be able to qualify as a national bank, the federal government would print their name on the bank label, or excuse me, on the note as such. The First National Bank of Philadelphia, scooting over here, the First National Bank and Trust Company in New Haven, Connecticut. Is this one, the First National Bank of Youngstown, Ohio, and allow them to issue this currency out, and it can be accepted at any of the different Federal Reserve banks around the United States, as well as, well, we didn't have Federal Reserve banks at the time, but the national banks essentially around the United States. You're able to use it for all the different goods and services. And so that was their original goal, kind of like a precursor to what we have in today's day of the Federal Reserve System and the 12 banks all issuing out money, but you can essentially use it and it can be exchangeable for any of the 12 different banks. Similar kind of concept. This was interesting, though, is because across the nation, there's banks sprouting up everywhere in the United States at that point, you know, from all over the dang place. And so you had some podunk places, you had some very popular places like New York City, Los Angeles, so on and so forth, that had all these different banks. And at one point in time, there was over 14,000 of these overall from the period of the late 1870s all the way up until 1929. And even past that too, these are still being printed and issued and stuff along those lines. So that's kind of the history on these. Like I said, I can go into way more detail, but the really cool thing about this is that there's a whole cult-like following of nationals and of how to collect them. No one's going to tell you exactly how to collect them. One of the most popular ways to do so is to get things like from different capitals to the different 50 United States, which Alaska being the most challenging. You know, to collect it from certain counties or all the banks within a certain county, all the banks within a certain state you live in, to get your hometown note. I mean, the types of ways to collect nationals is endless, to be honest with you. And so I decided to actually do a fun little way of doing that. And I wanted to try and see if I can get the first few charters of national banks. And so that's what you see here. And my goal was to get them all on $20 type 1s, which is what you also see here. There's two types of small size. You have type 1 and type 2. A type 1 is going to have just a serial number there and the charter number in dark black ink written like that, number one, number one. A type 2, you'll also see that charter number inserted right here and over on this side in brown ink, similar to the serial number color ink. But this right here is a very special note because this is the First National Bank of Philadelphia, as noted there, but you see this is charter number 1. Charter number 1, guys. This is the very first of the national banks that was ever issued in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And so it's a very special note. These are always desirable. These always carry a premium. This note right here is about a $350 note in this condition. And yeah, it's just a very, very cool note to have. Like I said, banks would request to become a national bank. They would send their information, have the certain amount of deposits and stuff on hand that the federal government required, and then they would issue them out. They printed the standard background borders and everything else already in place. They just left the charter number as well as the serial number and the First National Bank and city and state blank until whatever bank it was issued that. And so this is a very special note, dudes, being the very first charter number. To add to its coolness, I also have charter number 2. So there's the First National Bank and Trust Company of New Haven, Connecticut, and you can see the big 2 there on the right and left, which is charter number 2. So this is the second bank, national bank, that ever qualified by the federal government. And it wouldn't be cool if I didn't have number 3. And lo and behold, I have number 3 as well. And so the First National Bank of Youngstown, Ohio, is number 3. I want to get up to number 5. There's some showstoppers in the like 7 or 8. I forget which charter it is, but to get the full first 10 is very, very difficult in this small size type currency like this. But the first 5 are doable. There's actually a couple of available 4s right now. From Stamford, Connecticut is the next one, and then the other one is going to be Fremont. Number 5 is Fremont, Ohio. And there's no there's no order per se of these national banks being issued. It's essentially when they applied chronologically in time from that city and that bank that they applied to become national banks is when it was granted, and it was processed all through and stuff like that, and they got granted is the number they're issued in chronological order. So there's no specific, you know what I mean, like alphabetical order or by state or by county or city or anything like that. It's just more so when in time they applied to get this charter number. And so that's that. And one other thing I wanted to share with you guys, something that a lot of people get confused at times, is this little note right here. So as you can see, I'm just going to kind of flip the camera down here. So this also says national currency on the top, similar type of structure here. This is a series in 1929, but look at the left there. It says the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania will pay to the bearer on demand. And you can see instead of having a charter number 1, as you see up here, this has C, guys. And that is actually the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia's representation, which is C. Similar to exact same thing we still have today. And so a lot of people confuse these two right here. They think that these notes are the same as these notes. They are not. They are different. This is a Federal Reserve banknote. This is a national currency. Oftentimes people refer to these as national currency because it says national currency on top, but they had different obligations. These were issued by a specific bank. This was issued by the First National Bank of Philadelphia. This was issued by the Federal Reserve Bank of Philly, not the actual First National Bank. There was multiple national banks in the city of Philadelphia, one Federal Reserve Bank in the Philadelphia area. So big, huge difference. These are essentially what replaced these up here. So you had these up front, and then all of a sudden they wanted a more centralized type of banking structure that would span the United States in general, that was completely controlled by the federal government. No more of these 14,000 national banks throughout the U.S. In the early teens and 20s and 30s. And so they ended up scooping all those up. They went belly up and or were morphed into this other type of situation. And so big difference there, guys. So anyways, I really hope you learned a little bit of something like that. I'm going to go ahead and share some of my other nationals and other videos. I got a very special one, my hometown note. It's on a large size note. There's only about 12 of them known, and I paid a pretty penny for it, but it was random that it came up for sale, and I thought I'd probably never see one again in my lifetime if I didn't get it, and I'm happy I did. And I'll share the whole story about that and how I obtained that. But let me know what you guys think about these. If you've ever seen these, if you learned something, go ahead and comment and subscribe. And yeah, let me know what you guys think about nationals. Until next time, Solar Surfer out.